With an industry fund, that will be a percentage-based fee. So the more you have in super, the more you'll pay in fees. With an industry fund, you've got somebody else that's going to look after the administration of the fund for you. It's sort of like a set and forget. With an SMSF, it is a little bit more hands-on. There are some reporting obligations as an SMSF trustee. So what are the key questions to ask before deciding which fund type is right for you, whether that be industry or SMSF? And some of the key questions is, welcome to SMSF Insider, where we help busy professionals to gain financial independence using an SMSF. Hi, I'm Troy, founder of Blue Chip SMSF Services. And over the last 20 years, I've helped thousands of Aussies manage the complexities of self-managed super funds. And in this podcast, I'll answer your questions, break down the myths, so you can take charge of your financial freedom. Let's get into it. Hey guys, just a quick disclaimer and just a reminder that this is not personal advice. So make sure you speak with a licensed advisor before making any investment decision. We'll be talking about SMSFs versus industry funds. So what is an industry fund? An industry fund is essentially a pooled superannuation fund with a few different investment options and probably better for sort of maybe lower balances as opposed to the higher balances. So typically with an SMSF, you'll typically see a bit of a higher balance, and obviously when it comes to investing, you've got a much broader range of investment options available to you. So the two main differences are, of course, balances and as well as control. So with an industry fund, somebody else is making those decisions on your behalf, your investment decisions, and with an SMSF, you're actually making those decisions as opposed to somebody else. So you can invest in an industry fund, as I mentioned, will have maybe 5 or 6 different options for you, which might be okay with smaller balances when you're starting out. But as time goes on, your balance does grow, and SMSF may become a little bit more suitable when you have a bigger fund balance and you want to have a little bit more control over where your funds are invested. So they're the two main differences when it comes to investing, when it comes to an SMSF versus an industry fund. So which ones fare better? Well, it's a good point. So it really depends where the money is invested. So if you're in an industry fund in a conservative portfolio versus an SMSF with Australian international equities, the SMSF is, of course, going to outperform. But on the flip side, if you're in an industry fund with exposure in a high growth portfolio and your SMSF is sitting in cash, well, the industry fund's going to outperform. So it really depends on where your funds are invested as to which fund is going to perform better. The main difference is when, apart from obviously control and investment options, when you're talking about industry fund versus SMSF, is probably more so geared towards the fee arrangement or how you pay for those funds. So with an industry fund, that typically will be a percentage-based fee. So the more you have in super, the more you'll pay in fees. With an SMSF, typically will be a flat fee structure. So it does become more cost effective once you have a bigger fund balance to have an SMSF, because you're not paying, if you've got a larger fund balance and you're paying percentage-based fees, then of course those fees are going to be larger. So it does become a little bit more favourable with the higher fund balances, and that's why when you're talking about an SMSF, they do sort of, the ATO has a guideline of 200,000 is sort of where the crossover typically is, when it becomes perhaps a little bit more cost effective to have an SMSF over an industry fund. So they're the main differences with industry versus SMSF. As I said, when it comes to performance, it really depends on where the funds are actually invested. So an industry fund could outperform an SMSF if it's invested in a high growth fund versus an SMSF in a conservative sitting in cash or fixed interest, and vice versa. So that is the answer. There is no, one is better than the other. It really comes down to how much control and do you want to have over your retirement savings? Is it and what assets do you typically want to invest in? If it is more than just a conservative growth balanced or high growth fund, if you do want to be a bit more involved and you want bigger assets or assets like property, then certainly an SMSF is going to maybe a better option for those that want a bit more control over their retirement savings. So the answer is, so sorry to disappoint anyone that thought I was going to favour one over the other. It really does depend on where the assets are, where the funds are invested. With regards to, so most people that are establishing an SMSF, typically they want to invest in an SMSF because either they have a higher fund balance or they want to invest in assets that they can't do through their industry fund. So, and that when I say assets that you can't invest in an industry fund, I'm talking more about direct property and crypto, for example. Those property being the main one and traditional asset class that most Aussies love and understand. Most people do understand bricks and mortar and have had a positive experience over the longer term. So certainly when establishing a fund, most people want to establish an SMSF for that purpose over an industry fund. There are obviously major differences between the two. So with an industry fund, you've got somebody else that's going to look after the administration of the fund for you. It's sort of like a set and forget. With an SMSF, it is a little bit more hands-on. There are some reporting obligations and obligations as a whole as an SMSF trustee, and that is the main one being having a tax return done at the end of the financial year and an audit done. Now, most people, when establishing an SMSF, will typically outsource that role because no one is an expert in accounting and not everyone is an independent auditor. Most fund trustees will outsource that responsibility for their SMSF. And certainly it's not something you need to worry about with an industry fund because it's all done for you. But they are the major differences when it comes to reporting and responsibilities, is that SMSF does have is a little bit more hands-on and it isn't typically a sort of set and forget structure. Just quickly, guys, if you're a busy professional, fed up with traditional super funds and overwhelmed by the setup of your SMSF, we can help. Book in a call with my team using the link in the show notes and let's build your future on your terms. Now, back to the episode. So what are the key questions to ask before deciding which fund type is right for you, whether that be industry or SMSF? And some of the key questions is, do I want a little bit more control over my retirement savings, or am I happy with playing a bit of a passive role? If the answer is you want a little bit more control, then obviously an SMSF is probably going to be a little bit more suited. And also, where do you want to invest your funds? So if you're adamant that you want to invest in property, then in direct property, then an SMSF is probably going to be a little bit more suited towards your needs as opposed to an industry fund. Or I want to have gearing, I want to have a loan inside my SMSF to buy property. Well, again, or a loan inside my super fund to purchase property, then of course an SMSF is going to be probably more suited to you than an industry fund, because you can't purchase direct property through an industry fund. You can only do that with an SMSF. So there's some of the main questions that will perhaps might help you make up your mind between an industry fund and an SMSF. Of course, balance as well. If you've got a lower balance, that's sort of then an industry fund might be more suitable for you personally. But certainly if you've got a bit of a larger balance and want to get a little bit more involved, then that's probably when an SMSF is going to be right for you. Before you're making any investment decisions, please seek advice, personal advice from a qualified advisor or planner. But certainly these episodes are for education purposes only. They're not to provide advice. It's simply to provide you with a little bit more education before making any investment decisions. So compliance and reporting hugely differ between an industry fund and an SMSF. With an SMSF, of course, you have reporting obligations with your tax return and your audit sort of every year. With an industry fund, there really is no reporting obligations or compliance obligations that you need to worry about, because your industry fund will do that for you. So that's how those two differ from a reporting and compliance perspective. Guys, thanks for tuning in on this episode of SMSF Insider, where we talked about industry funds versus SMSFs. Certainly as a wrap, as a whole, or summarising the episode, certainly with an SMSF, you will have more investment options as opposed to an industry super fund. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of SMSF Insider. If you got value from this, make sure you subscribe so you never miss the strategies we share to help you take control of your financial future. Find us on socials at Blue Chip SMSF or book a call with our team to see if we can help you.